Okay. So you can give them the opportunity to change by saying, this is what you're doing and this is how it makes me feel.
Did you ever?
Absolutely.
Okay, you did.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So making sure that you inform the person.
Informing them.
Yeah. You need to make sure that you let them know that this is not behavior that you find acceptable.
So again, kind of like we said in the previous show, did you turn the computer off and back on again?
Yeah.
So did you inform them?
Did you inform them?
Because they literally may be like, honey, I thought pressing your shirts every day, 7 days a week, including your ties and your underwear was perfectly fine. Yeah. And you're like, no.
Yeah. This doesn't make me feel so good.
Yeah, and I don't mind it if you will allow me to pick
out
my own
shirt.
But so informing them. Okay.
Yeah. So I think step number one. Yeah. Making a better effort to inform, because you need to communicate. Yeah, you got to communicate. I think every person who's in one of these situations, you got to communicate. You can't just not communicate. And that honestly, of all the things that one of the things I would take responsibility for is, just like many guys, we don't talk. Mm-hmm. So when something's got you twisted, the last thing you want to do is tell a woman she's really gotten under your skin, because some women are kind of toxic and they will do it more.
Yes, some are. Yes.
Some of them are. Yes. And because of that, a lot of guys will say, yeah, if she's on my trigger, I'm not going to really tell her, because then that'll mean she'll step on it again. And that makes it like hell. Yeah. So a lot of guys won't. But if you are in a reasonably good situation before it turns bad, let her understand.
The Conversations from the Cave Show is produced by the Provox Media Group. The Provox Media Group provides custom digital media and production services to ethical businesses around the world. For more information, call 256-361-9127 or visit provoxmediagroup.com. Now, back to the Man Cave with Kirk Kennedy and the CFTC crew.
Okay, now let me ask you this, especially someone who's been through it. Would you suggest that guys out there, if they've never had, if they feel as though their wife may have been abused before and they're seeing some of these signs, oh my gosh, my wife is crazily over it. She wants to have sex 20 times a day. I can't keep up. This is actually ruining our marriage. Or my wife doesn't want to have sex for months at a time. I can't keep up. This is, she can't keep up. This is ruining our marriage. Would you, and they think that this is the cause, would you recommend them just coming out and asking her, or would you recommend them trying? Should they come and say, "Hey, were you abused, honey?" Or
no. I think the first thing, I think what happened in my case is something that I would advise guys do. If you suspect that there might have been abuse because of the kinds of behaviors that you see exhibited, I would first of all say get as well versed on the topic as you can. Go to conferences, go to support groups.
I'm sure online, tons of info.
Tons of info. Well, most of the time, unfortunately, I will say this: when I started looking a decade ago, most of the time most of the literature that I actually saw was bashing men for being abusers. It never had anything to do with recognizing somebody who had been abused. Do you see what I'm saying?
That makes sense, yes.
Yeah, so a lot of those articles were they tended to be very feminist oriented articles, and they tended not to really do a lot except to say that a victim was a victim because somebody was bad. Yeah. And that doesn't really help somebody who's dealing with a victim who has had somebody that was bad, male or female. Yeah. So I would say get as much information as you can, go to support groups. Third, if you can, get her into counseling so that discuss with the counselor that you have some serious concerns about her psychological being. You might not want to say that you think she's abused because you don't know. Yeah. But you might say, hey, these things are happening. I have some concerns. And then be committed to helping reveal those. If she's not a person who is willing to go through counseling, you may try things like clergy, group discussions, things like that. But at the end of the day, there has to be responsibility on both sides. It just can't be one person that's making all the sacrifices to try to help someone who's become toxic.
So it sounds like, too, a lot of the guys out there, instead of trying to just sit behind a screen and find it out, which it sounds like that's not a terrible method, but if you can get in front of a living, breathing human and say, hey, listen, these are some concerns I have. I'm just wondering. Hypothetically speaking, my friend Bob.
Because they repress, many times abused people repress memories.
So if you're trying to bring it up, either that could bring a flood of emotions or it could be like,
and you may not be prepared.
Denial,
right.
And you may not be
prepared to handle it. Right.
Or complete denial. Right. And two, that's a really good point that you brought up is, being prepared to handle it, because, if you go and ask, hey, listen, have you ever been touched, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden they say, yep, Uncle Buck, Uncle Buck, who you play golf with every year,
is the one
who messed with me when I was a kid.
Yeah, he's a predator.
And that's why I never want to come see him, whatever the case is. I never want to come play golf with you guys, whatever the case is.
Right.
So being prepared that way. But also, I believe, would you suggest spiritual help, which of course I think
spiritual help is, So let me say two things about that. And I'm going to be very, very real. I believe that prayer and spiritual guidance are very, very important in almost every decision in life. However, I believe that oftentimes things like pastoral counseling may not be sufficient unless depending on the clinician, it may or may not be sufficient to actually facilitating change. I think partially that can be because it's practitioner specific. So there might be a very wise pastor who understands that, you know what, I've seen this before. This looks like abuse.
Yeah.
Or it could be that you have someone who's sort of read it in a book and they don't really know what they're looking for either because they've never lived it. Yeah. And they don't really have a perspective on what that abused person is going through or the person who's dealing with the survivor of abuse.
So it sounds like obviously praying for them, doing everything you can do on your end, spiritually to help, yourself out, but also using the materials that God has given us here, which are doctors and practitioners and all those people.
I think that mental health professionals are extremely important in these cases because, for one, I don't think that most men are prepared for the onslaught of emotions that come from the person who has been abused. Number two is when that person actually comes to grips with the revelation of that abuse, the person who's going to deal with a lot of the backlash from that is going to be the person closest to them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the person closest to them and they're dealing with their hatred of Uncle Buck, or they're dealing with their hatred from their father who got them pregnant, or their sister that they got pregnant, or whomever, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
father
absolutely.
or kinfolk or whatever, then you may not even be equipped to recognize that, oh my gosh, my wife's been pregnant before. By her dad, that
would hit me like 7 or 8 trucks at one time.
It's like, so that may not have been something that you could consider.
Yeah, you're like, oh, no problem. She'll tell me she's been abused and I'll hug her and kiss her. It's like, wait a minute.
The real deal is
you've been high-fiving the guy that's gotten her pregnant before and you didn't even know. Be careful.
Be careful. Right. So that's an example. Making sure that you are understanding that the ramifications of those experiences are far beyond sometimes what we can even imagine. If she has gone the way of being more loose in her sexual behavior as a result of the abuse, then she confesses to you that she was a sex addict as a result of this. That could be a very big revelation for somebody who thinks that his wife, was just hanging around with him.
Yeah.
Because that is a facade that sometimes everybody wants to marry a good girl. Everybody wants to sleep with a bad one, though.
Right? You know what I'm saying? It's so crazy. What is a lady in the street with a freak in the bed? Everybody wants,
tell the truth, though.
But when you hear, but like you said, if all of a sudden my wife's like, I've been abused, and because of that, I've been with, 45 other men, and you're like, wait a minute.
Seriously?
I thought it was just Bill.
It's like,
so there could be an onslaught of emotions for you too. So being prepared and having compassion and understanding that what happened to her happened to her. She did not happen to it. And the result, her behavior is a result of someone else's wickedness, someone else's evil, someone else's obscene selfishness.
And in addition, that can have ramifications on the way that she sees every action that you do.
Mm-hmm.
See, and if you don't understand the depths to which she has fallen, then you won't understand how to be able to communicate. And that's the thing that I think, if I were to tell any guys, if you're dealing with somebody who has had these kinds of situations and they've been abused and they've had these kinds of challenges, you've got to recognize that it's probably going to be beyond what you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
What they've gone through is, if you've never gone through anything with abuse, you won't have any clue as to how deep those wounds can run. And if you don't, then you do not know how to prepare for the kinds of backlash that can come when they come to either grips with it or when they lash out at you as a result of it. So I think those are the things that are really critical. And then I think the last thing that I would point out is you really do have to be committed to both of the people involved. So if you have one person who lives in denial and you have one person who's trying to find out and get it revealed, that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one person still trying to cover it up and say they're fine, you're the problem, then that's a dead end. You can't bring a horse to water and force them to drink. You can only say, yeah, I think that this is an issue. That's about all a husband or a man can do. It's like, yeah, this is a problem. And if your woman is not committed to making the decision of choosing that life, of revealing it to maybe a private counselor, she may not even choose to talk to you. But if she's not able to even reveal it to a sworn counselor of some sort, then you really don't have a leg to stand on, because it's not going to be a foundation of trust. Mm-hmm. It's a foundation built on a lie and a facade. And if you try to build something on a lie and a facade, it'll never stand.
And I think something, and even though I haven't experienced this and I know we're about to go, I think that I can probably say with full confidence is this matter is not to be taken lightly. This is to be held,
absolutely not.
Held very delicately. Treat this very, very delicately.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I mean, you're
with counselor, with a counselor,
like he says, with a counselor, and that's what he's saying, with a counselor, because it sounds like you can literally break something that's bent. Or you can create a brand new creature just with your compassion, with your patience, with your understanding. You can create a whole new creature, or you can literally snap something that
and you may find that the shrapnel can affect you
and even damage yourself in the process. Wow.
And so in that point that you made about validation, if somebody isn't feeling valid on their own, and they are spewing out that venom, I call it spewing venom. So if somebody is toxic and they see you making progress and they're spewing venom to control you because they feel like the better you get, the sooner you'll leave, because they don't feel adequate. And I think that you have to find a way in dealing with these situations where a counselor, and I really keep stressing this is not something that can be done just sitting over a cup with a bunch of friends. This is not that situation. These wounds run deep. And it can lead to things like chemical addictions, sexual addictions. Even sometimes these folks are so toxic they can kill you, and they can attack you out of their control needs. And I think that if you're not careful, you can become an abused person. And the result of that is you don't trust anybody else. And as a guy, that really becomes very toxic, because then you got the players. Then you got the guys who are running around sleeping with a woman, but they'll never have any close intimacy.
Or the abusers themselves turning into.
But they then become abusers.
They become an abuser. They become the abuser
because they have a hatred now for somebody who treated them badly.
Exactly. Like, I'm treat all women.
Yeah. If this woman was bad, then chances are every woman's bad. I'm not going to let her get that close. And I think that's the unfortunate. So that when you ask, should a person get into a relationship like that? My answer, frankly, is if you can avoid it, don't get into it. If you're already in it, get professional help, because professional help is the only way that you're going to be able to navigate through it. It is not something you can do over coffee. It's not going to happen. Third, you and the person have to be committed. Otherwise, you're barking up the wrong tree. Because if the abused is not on board with it, there is no way that they're going to seek treatment if they don't see it as a problem. They won't. And you will be stuck in a situation where your needs are not met. It's a toxic situation. And then you're raising your kids in dysfunction. And the sad part about it is, usually if it's a woman that's toxic, your kids are going to be with the woman. That means that they will castigate and castrate your son, and they will turn your daughters into haters.
Yeah, men haters.
Yeah. And if you look at the number of single women who are grown up in woman-dominated homes, a lot of them do not see men in a positive light. And that's because their mothers are bitter, and they teach their daughters to be bitter, and you can't trust that man, you can't believe this, you can't do that. And they don't realize that many of these things have been because of their experience, a toxic one.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, at the end of the day, get professional counseling. Make sure that you have 2 committed partners that are willing to go through this thing. And then number 3 is to make sure that if you can spot the signs early on, that look before you leap, because by that time you got your kids exposed to that. You got your relatives exposed to that toxicity. It can be a disaster. It can really, really be a disaster. Until next time, this has been Conversations from the Cave. Of course, my colleague and fellow panel member Mustang has been hanging out with us, and we will be back next week with an addition to the show, probably a part C, but we want to encourage you to keep your chin up and to love one another.
The Conversations from the Cave Show is brought to you by the Alabama Cornea Care Center, Northern Alabama's first irregular cornea keratoconus and scleral lens referral center. specializing in the management of degenerative cornea disease and complications resulting from refractive surgery. The Alabama Cornea Care Center, helping patients see the light of the world. Conversations from the Cave is a copywritten production of the Provox Media Group, creators of positive, inspirational media for businesses and nonprofit organizations.